And tonight on PM Express, a conversation about the state of the nation as portrayed by the President, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. It's the President's last but one address to Parliament on how he has run the affairs of the nation so far. So what picture has the President been painting of the nation to Parliament? And tonight we want to do a reality check of all the things President Akufo-Addo has been saying. So he started, in fact, today he didn't follow the pattern. He started on security, in fact, security in the sub-region before narrowing it down. But let's talk about the economic issues that he raised. He said the macroeconomic indicators are pointing in the right direction. Inflation, which peaked at 54.1% in December, has reduced to 23.5%. Real GDP growth for the first three quarters averaged 2.8%, higher than the targeted growth of 1.5% for 2023. And he talked about the CD. Remember, that's a very interesting conversation you and I want to hear. He said the CD has been largely stable since February 2023 with a cumulative depreciation of 9% between February and December 2023. Tonight, we'll be fact-checking that. Gross international reserve, he said, is reflected a significant build-up at the $5.9 billion, enough to cover 2.7 months for importers of goods. Now, he talked about the energy sector, and that's also a big conversation because you and I want our lights on all the time. The energy sector debt, he says, has reduced considerably. Remember, he said the IPP debt was not 1.6 billion as reported by the media, but rather was $1.2 billion. I mean, there's been conversations about this particular issue because it has to do with power. Now, government, he says, has reached a commercial agreement on headline terms to restructure power purchase agreements and arrears with some IPPs to save some $9.1 billion. And ECG has been able to secure a fixed monthly energy purchase price with all the IPPs. I mean, if this is true, we'll be checking all of that for you tonight. Now he talks about broadly the energy sector. He says we've managed to keep the lights on these last 7 years, and which the minority has been challenging since he made this comment. Current national access to electricity, he says, is 88.85%. 207 communities, he said, were connected to the grid in 2023, and Ghana is aiming to achieve a universal access in 2024. Now, he talks about security, and which many are questioning. Why did he not follow his pattern of starting with the economy? Today, he started on the security foot, and he started from the sub-region. He said government has quickened retailing of security agencies against threats. He says the government has ensured expansion of security agencies, and Ghana is the only coastal state along the Gulf of Guinea with no record on terrorist attacks. He goes ahead, talks about chieftaincy and disputes that are cause for worry. In fact, he mentions Boko, an alluring magnet to mischief makers and extremists. That's how he puts it. He says government in the past year have taken measures to resolve the Boko chieftaincy. And then he spoke about the radio stations. He says is propagating hate speech in the Upper East. Reason it's been shut down. And then he warns all of us, or he urges all of us to take the See Something, Say Something campaign that was launched by the National Security Ministry some time ago. He says we should take it serious. Now, let's talk about democracy generally, and the president has been speaking about that. He says Ghana continues to give maximum support to ECOWAS and AU in this direction, and he says West Africa is under threat of terrorism and violent extremism. And he goes ahead to talk about election 2024, much interested by so many of you. All of us are interested about how peaceful election 2024 will be. The president has categorically stated that he will ensure there's free, fair, and peaceful elections. And he has a warning for the EC. He says it must ensure credible and peaceful elections. He says the EC must work with political parties to address their concerns. We'll be delving into all of that this evening. But more interesting is this one that a lot of you are talking about. He says the Office of the Attorney General has saved Ghana over 10 trillion in judgment debt. We'll be delving into this situation. 10 trillion, that can do a lot of things for Ghanaians. We'll be fact-checking as well, and we'll be going into that issue. Then he talks about the kind of jobs that the One District, One Factory has produced, and he says it stands at 170,000. Not only that, he talks about the proposal before cabinet in terms of the film industry. It says favorable fiscal regime for cinema projects, including income tax and VAT incentives. All of that, he says, is before cabinet, and cabinet is dealing with it. Import duty exemptions on film production equipment. So tonight, we ask, what really is a true state of the nation? I'll be joined in the studio by Ranking Member on Foreign Affairs Committee in Parliament and MP for North Tongue, Samuel Okujeto Ablakwa. I would also be joined by Professor Godfred Bokmin, who is a professor of economics and and also a professor of finance at the University of Ghana Business School. Would also be joined tonight by Dr. John Osei-Kwapong, who is a political analyst. He's a CDD fellow in governance. He would also be joining us. And then later in the discussion, we'll be joined by a member of the governing NPP. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Let's settle for the conversation after this break. And welcome to PM Express. We are discussing President Akufo-Addo's last but one State of the Nation address to Parliament. Remember, PM Express is brought to you by Sintex Tanks. It is strong, it is tough. Alomo Bitters experience greatness in every moment. Ghana AIDS Commission is also a sponsor. Pepsodent, every smile matters. With Sintex Tank, no matter your water needs, Sintex Tank has it all. Sintex Tank is first to introduce double layer tank, and now you can have as many layers as you want. Sintex Tank is first to introduce white inner layer tanks in Ghana. We now introduce to you the customer specs, order which lets you order any color and size of preference. And Sintex Tank gives you the longest warranty of 7 years, which no other tank gives you in Ghana. So whatever your water consumption, size of project or demand, choose Sintex Tank. We have agents nationwide. Call them on 0244-335-168 or shop online at sintexgh.com. Sintex Tank, a strong, a tough. With Pepsodent Cavity Fighter, it is fortified with fluoride and microcalcium ingredients, sealing tiny and invisible holes in your teeth. This prevents cavities. It keeps your teeth strong and mouth healthy. Pepsodent Cavity comes in 175 grams, big family pack, 120 grams, a Jaqua pack, and 65 gram and 12 gram sachets, so you can always get what you can afford at any time. Don't just use toothpaste that brushes your teeth. Use Pepsodent that protects your teeth. Pepsodent is recommended by the Ghana Dental Association. Pepsodent gives you the opportunity to talk to a dentist for free. Call toll-free 0800-161-000. You can get Pepsodent at any shop near you. Let me welcome you, Okujeto Ablakwa, who is MP for North Tongue. He's a ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee. And let me say welcome, gentlemen, Dr. Osei-Kwapong and Professor Bokmin, who's also joined virtually. Grateful for your time. Let me begin with you by picking generally your thoughts on the President's address tonight. And I'll start with you, Professor Bokmin, as the President tells us that our IMF deal will not be affected, still intact, even with a change in minister.
Good evening to our co-panelists, and good evening to our cherished listeners. Yeah, so I think it's been a sobering moment. I want to put it this way. There's something unique about all that is happening, because the President's first State of the Nation address was heavily also about IMF program. And probably the last State of the Nation address of the President is also heavily about the IMF program. So what progress have we really made in the last 7 years as a country? On the substantive issue, I don't think that the mere change of the Minister of Finance would affect the IMF program. It will not. More so, the current or the substantive Minister of Finance is an insider. He's not really an outsider. He's been a part of government, and therefore I do not think that the change would affect how the IMF program would go. And that is the more reason why the president should have effected this change long ago, right? It's just too late, and I don't think that it's going to have any impact on the economy, except that they are preparing for election rather. So, because if you look at the previous IMF-supported program that the current president inherited, it was a different person who led the negotiation, essentially. It was led by Professor Kwesi Botry, and it was implemented by Honorable Setekpe. Even that, the government that negotiated that program and started the implementation for almost 1 year lost power, and a different government altogether had to come and continue. So I don't think that the change, the president was right, that the change will not have any material effect on the IMF-supported program. But what we should rather be mindful is how the election, as the election heats up, particularly in the last quarter of 2023, how we manage the economy, especially the fiscal side, not only from central government, but then you're also looking at it from ministry, department, agencies, and state-owned enterprises, all put together. If you adopt a general government approach to accounting for debt and all the issues, how we manage that will be more fundamental to the future of the IMF-supported program. I think that's what the focus should be. But on a more substantive issue, if you look at the first State of the Nation address that the president gave in 2017, and then the one in 2024, you will see clearly that there's a lot missing. Let me put it that way. And I was expecting to see the progress that the president was going to report to us on the fight against Galamsey, right, which dominated the headline in 2017. I didn't see that. I don't know whether the president will get another opportunity to tell us how we have worked hard to preserve our natural reserves or resources or nature as a whole. And then also you will see that the 2017 State of the Nation address was heavy on the economy because the statistics did not look that good. And therefore, we majored on that, in more or less trying to make the outgoing government look some way and all of that. Okay, so we draw so much on the statistics, the fiscal deficit, the exchange rates, where inflation was, and all of that. But then, fast forward 7 years down the line, if you look at the fundamentals in terms of the state of our debt, the fiscal deficit, exchange rate depreciation, and the rest of them, really, it's as though we have essentially put the stone where we picked it from 2017.
He says the microeconomic indicators are pointing to the right direction. Let me ask you this directly. Are they pointing at the right direction?
No. I mean, if you look at the tone, in fact, in the past 25 years or so, or let's say the past 32 years, Ghana has been laying a foundation. I don't know what kind of building we want to put on that foundation that is taking us more than 32 years. And we are still laying foundation. We are still restoring. We are still rebuilding. Every 4 years, we talk about rebuilding, restoring, correcting. Okay, so it's very difficult to actually see the incremental progress that we are making, which will translate to improvement in the real lives of people. We should be interested to know how many people have we lifted out of poverty in the last 7 years. Right. How have the standard of living of Ghanaians improved? Let's not take it for granted that what has happened from the third quarter of 2021 to date, which also resulted in the domestic debt exchange, has never happened in our history before. And we should not underestimate the impact of that domestic debt exchange and the numerous taxes that Ghanaians have had to go through. Since I started monitoring data and interacting with people in this country, I've never seen in my life at a time where so many people want to leave this country. Professionals, the slightest opportunity, they want to go. You see them during the day at the embassies. In the evening, you see them at the airport. They are leaving. I think that we need to go beyond that, and I want to believe that I don't think that we have made much progress And if you see what the president is recounting, and that is what our leaders have been doing in the last couple of years, we are counting projects. We are counting projects, physical things here and there. But how all of this work together to improve life, that disconnect, okay, is there. We are not able to put all of that together to see how at the end of the day, this actually impact human life. Because whether we like it or not, at the center of it all is about human beings. So when we talk about development, when we talk about progress, it must impact people. So we talk about the 5 P's. Development must impact people. It must reflect peace. It must reflect partnership, prosperity, and it must also preserve the planet Earth. So let's ask our president, the government, whether the progress we are talking about here has preserved our planet Earth. And that is why I talked earlier about our fight against galamsey. How has this impacted people? Because, you can talk about GDP, but I have said it time and again that the mere fact that GDP is positive and is growing necessarily doesn't mean that all is well with Ghanaians. Okay, we are talking about a metric, a proper one that goes beyond GDP. We are no longer going to celebrate GDP growth because it doesn't necessarily imply that standards of living or development has arrived or has come and the rest of them. So I think that, and I'm about to believe that the president knows very well that things haven't gone well, especially how we manage COVID and then the election and all that happened. And MFA, what really typified the lack of leadership is the fact that collectively we fail to recognize the signs much or when it matters most. And we have said that the optimal time for Ghana to have requested an IMF program was actually in the 3rd quarter of 2021. Ghana and Kenya exited COVID having a similar economic fundamentals in terms of debt challenges and the rest of them. The difference, Kenya didn't have to do a haircut, okay, and domestic one for that matter was that Kenya proactively reached out to the IMF soon after COVID-19, okay, and secured a 3-year extended credit facility worth over $3 billion. At that time, Ghana chose pride. When the call was optimal, the time was optimal, we failed to do so. And I want to believe that that is where the leadership failed Ghana. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had to go through the kind of restructuring, especially the domestic debt exchange that we went through. And
Thank you.
That's huge.
I'm grateful, Professor Bokpin, for laying the foundation for us on the economy. Let me bring in Okujeto Blakwa. And I must say that Frank Anodompre was billed to be on this show, but due to last-minute circumstances beyond our control, I'm told that a member of the NPP will be joining us. I will be announcing him to you shortly, but let me ask you, were your expectations met today?
Well, good evening to you, good evening to the panel and to all distinguished viewers. I must be very honest with you that the president left me terribly disappointed. As Member of Parliament from the North Tongue constituency, which is the epicenter of the spillage by the VRA from the Akosombo and Kpong dams, which really is been the biggest national disaster in recent years. I am totally shocked that the president did not say a word. I've gone through the entire address. I listened to him attentively in the chamber, and I couldn't believe it, that the president did not have any word of empathy. He did not express any plans for resettlement, for compensation. We are talking about 40,000 of our fellow citizens displaced, according to NADMO. In my constituency alone, 12,633 people displaced. As we speak, thousands of our fellow citizens are living in refugee-like tents. They are living in abject destitution. They have their entire livelihoods destroyed. Their houses have been damaged. According to NADMO, about 1,540 houses totally destroyed by the flood waters. And the president, who really has such a tremendous reputation for expressing empathy, particularly when similar disasters or disasters even on a much smaller scale occur in other jurisdictions. He's amongst the first group of world leaders who will send out messages of solidarity, messages of empathy. And 5 months down the lane, you're delivering the message on the state of the nation. Thousands of your citizens are living in tents, and you do not spare a thought for them. You do not express any empathy whatsoever. It is the height of insensitivity. It is the height of callousness, of lack of fellow feeling. And you see, it is so unpresidential, it is so unpatriotic, it is so un-Ghanaian. And really, to me, that is such a sore point in this entire address, and which really reflects a certain clear picture that this president is out of touch. He is living in a bubble. And no wonder a lot of the issues he's touched on and he's decided to speak about are either not accurate or they are not the germane issues that the Ghanaian people want to address. I mean, the president, shockingly, did not talk about corruption, for example, did not talk about youth unemployment, did not talk about galamsey. I mean, the major things that really are of concern to the Ghanaian people.
He said the 1D1F has produced 170,000 jobs. You heard that.
Youth unemployment has been worsening. You take the population and housing census of 2021. They're talking about youth unemployment at 14%. A few days ago, the Ghana Statistical Service sounded the alarm that it is worsening, 14.7%. There are millions of Ghanaian young people who have graduated from school 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. They're still at home. I mean, the number of petitions that I receive on a daily basis, graduates from nursing schools, the PharmD, those who did, the doctorate in pharmacy, they've been home for years. Engineers, planners, so many professionals who have studied. We've asked them to play their part, be disciplined, go to school, graduate, make sure you achieve laurels. They have done their part. We are failing them. I mean, I was really bewildered when the president sought to assure us that nothing would change about the IMF program and it's intact. And he thought that we should be applauding that statement. I mean, this IMF deal is so poorly negotiated. A lot of the obnoxious taxes, which now he says we should describe him as a mate and that he takes no responsibility. All of those obnoxious taxes are contained.
Indeed, the president had the opportunity to respond to that.
In this negotiated IMF deal, including, many people do not know that the worsening unemployment is because of what has been agreed with the IMF, a total freeze on public sector employment. So I rather wanted to hear an effort to renegotiate this very bad deal. I mean, the financial haircuts that people have been forced to take, pensioner bondholders, the suffering of senior citizens, the middle class is being wiped out. And Professor Bokpin is right. We all have mates, we all have colleagues who are living in droves. I mean, as ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, when you look at the data, you talk to ambassadors, high commissioners, and they tell you how they are inundated, the number of people who are applying for visas and who are leaving and are just disappointed in leadership. I mean, I really, listening to the president today, I could not wait for December 7th because he clearly has no magic wand in these last few months. He has no practical solution. There is no pragmatic approach. He only acknowledges that if you look at his last words, the last paragraph, he says, Mr. Speaker, we stumbled. Who made us stumble? All the crises we are facing, self-inflicted. You have been following us in Parliament. How many times did I not sound the alarm bells about, for example, 20,000 euros an hour presidential travels? The National Cathedral project, $58 million, the world's most expensive pit. Today, he couldn't talk about it. He had assured the nation 4 years ago that in a few days, 6 March 2024, he will go commission the National Cathedral project. As we speak, that has become the world's most expensive pit. Virtually all the credible priests, the credible clergymen on that board have abandoned the project. I mean, look at the wastage all over. Look at the dissipation of resources. Not too long ago, we've been talking about...
He's admitting that, yes, we made some mistakes.
Self-inflicted. Mistakes we shouldn't have made. Mistakes that are unpardonable. I mean, look, I am not saying that when we were in power, 8 years living in 2016, we created paradise. But at least, when we were living, we didn't leave an economy that required financial haircuts. We did not leave an economy that requires a domestic debt exchange program. We didn't leave an economy that was declared bankrupt, that was downgraded by Fitch, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, given junk status. We didn't have hospitals crying as they are today that we don't have dialysis machines. 19 people did not die when we were in power. Because
the president said it has done enough in the health sector. He talks about Agenda 111.
Will callously not release just 4 million cedis. A government that can spend $12 million on a Japa, $2 million on the SkyTrain fanciful project, which has not been refunded, $58 million on the National Cathedral, $243 million on an ongoing Africa Games. I mean, when Morocco, a few years ago, spent 46 million euros, you take what even Australia did recently by pulling out entirely from hosting the Commonwealth Games, because you're saying that the economy is not in a good place. And you can't even compare their economy to the mess that we find ourselves. So we are where we are because of bad leadership. Look, Ghana has never been in this place. The level of destruction, the level of corruption, the level of despondency, it is just unprecedented. And that is why I am clear in my mind that on December 7, 2024, the Ghanaian people are going to show this government the exit. They will not give President Akufo-Addo a third term by voting for Bawumia. They clearly have to leave. They
the president actually has made a very good case for the free SHS. You were a deputy minister for education. I'll come back to you because I'm told the communications director of the NPP, Richard Ahanyagwa, has joined us. Grateful for your time. How would you explain this? Because listening to Honorable Kujeto Ablakwa, he talks about a more satisfactory address by the president if he had spoken about corruption, galamsey, and even how he was going to turn the unemployment rate round, especially in his constituency, the MEPE and not tongue issues we had with the VRA.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Aisha, and good evening to my co-panelist. I think that he makes a good point when he said that President didn't mention that. But then that's really because you cannot necessarily or possibly mention everything.
But those are critical areas that everybody is interested. Corruption. Recently, we've had a back and forth on where we are as a country on the corruption index. That's a very important issue. Galamsey is an issue that the president himself put his presidency on the line for. So you can't rule out these areas.
Well, I've only just said a few words, so if you allow me. So if you go on that tangent, we possibly will have to include possibly everything, because everything is important. And so let's just agree to say that, yes, he didn't mention MEPE, he didn't talk about galamsey, whatever else that we want him to talk about, simply because he cannot possibly talk about everything. And so whilst I agree with him that though he should mention something like that, practically you can't mention everything. But on MEPE, I think that the president has demonstrated enough commitment by his presence there, and then also in making provision for some 220 million Ghana cedis to be allocated for the resettlement of the people. So to my good brother, the idea and the commitment to help with the resettlement of the people has been provided for in the 2024 budget, and the president is committed to that. And so it's a question of trying to see the implementation of that. So without mentioning it, he's made provision for it. And my point that I want us to agree on is that not everything can possibly be mentioned in that. I think the president made a point at some point when he was talking about the development effort of this government, saying that if he wants to go line by line and mention those, we possibly could not have finished that address today. So let's agree that it's not everything that can possibly be given mention in this stage, a limited time to give an address. So an overview, which I can tell you that touches on the key issues, makes very significant admission about where we are, what we are doing to bring the economy back. I think that we should focus on what is in it and what we can derive from it as a country going forward, and analyze those rather than focusing on what is not in it.
What kind of signal was the president? What signal did he want to give to Ghanaians by omitting some of these things?
So let's not belabor the point. I think I've made an indication to say that if you want to, you cannot include everything. And so our analysis should not be about what is not in it, but what is in it. Let's talk about what is in it and do the analysis, because then we can just be speculating about why he didn't put it in. That will not get us anywhere. Okay. So let's do the substantial thing of analyzing what is in it. Okay. I think the point for me, if you want me to talk about what my highlights were, I can talk about that. But I want to just say a bit about Professor Bokpin's submission, which I have a little slight concern with. You see, on one hand, he says that, the economy in 2017, when the president gave SONA, talked about, IMF. And then on this penultimate address, it was also heavy on IMF. And then so literally just criticizing government going to IMF for support not being, the ideal thing to do, which then is surprising to me when he gets to a point where he's saying that third quarter 2021 was the ideal time for the government to go to IMF. I was thinking that consistent with his thinking to say that we should not go to IMF, but we should manage the economy ourselves.
Your finance minister said he wasn't going to IMF. At a point, exactly. He thought it wise to go. So yes, an economist can also suggest that.
Aisha, I'm actually going to make the point you're making to say that Professor Bokpin, consistent with his belief that this government should have gone to IMF, because that was a critique from the beginning, should have actually agreed with the government to say that in 2021, we believe that we can solve the problem ourselves, which he referred to as pride. It wasn't pride. It was the belief that as Ghanaians, we must divine our solutions. We must figure out our policy alternatives to be able to solve our problems by ourselves, which was the path that we took. And the finance minister rightly said that we prefer not to go to IMF. We rather solve the problem ourselves, which for me, I think is a progressive leadership decision.
I get a sense that he was trying to paint a picture of reality, that if you decided to go to IMF, then that was the right time to go.
But you see, so the right time to go, which he says is the right time to abandon the decisions that you can make to solve your own problems. So when you identify this the right time, you're just saying that it's right time for me not to solve the problem. Because when you are in difficulty, you apply your own resources and get to a point, if you cannot, you are after all a member of the IMF, then you can go there for the necessary support. But by all means, you must demonstrate your own capacity to be able to do it. Okay, so that's something I think that based on his argument in the initial stages saying that we picked it from here and we left it here, he should have recognized that the government didn't necessarily want to go there. We didn't want to take the easy path. We wanted to stand on our own 2 feet as a people to be able to figure out solutions to our own problem. And I submit to you that but for the contentious nature of the e-levy conversation in Parliament, if that had gone on smoothly, we would have been in a place where the resources we needed to carry through 2022, in the budget 2022, we would have prevailed and not be in the situation we're in at the point when eventually we'll have to go to the IMF in July of 2022.
I spoke about the... Okay, wrap it up for me.
Actually has the idea of trying to deal with these problems. And the point that ought to also be made is that before, Professor Buckling did not make that admission, which for me is very concerning, that before we got to that point in 2021, there were events that happened that the first 3 years of this government in the first term was very successful. The economic indicators, the macroeconomic indicators were performing very well. The lowest inflation on record in this Fourth Republic, about 7.6% or so, was recorded. And then everything went out of alignment with the happening of COVID-19, exacerbated with the Russia-Ukraine war. Those admissions, as a professional or as a finance person, he needs to make those admissions. Then we can progress and do the analysis.
I think we've gone beyond COVID and Ukraine, and the reality is before us now.
Asha, I'm actually just making, because if you are making a time series analysis of events that have led to where we are, you cannot jump that critical happening. You can have your own argument about how it was managed, but you have to acknowledge it. And therefore, when you say that it wasn't managed well, then you profile your solution, your alternative. So I think that in having an honest conversation, we need to account for that. But you see, we've gone past that. The president makes significant admissions today, which my brother Okujeto Ablako has admitted to, is saying that we stumbled. That stumbled happened.
A very important point that the president made. Of course, there's been a lot of conversations about the free SHS. The president, whilst applauding the NPP government for running a smooth free SHS, he says that we should find ways of improving it.
Yeah.
I mean, what was going through your mind? You are a former deputy education minister.
You allow me to just quickly respond to some of the points that my brother Richard has made. Let's be very frank and sincere with ourselves. When Richard says that the president couldn't have touched on everything, Richard is virtually telling us that the 40,000 Ghanaians who are displaced, their plight doesn't matter. Because, yes, you cannot speak to everything, but you speak to the issues that are important, the issues that matter. And if a national disaster on this scale, of this proportion, the president did not find it worthy to speak to this. Already, Richard talks about the allocation in the budget. Yes, there's a difference between an allocation which Parliament has approved and an actual release by the executive. As we speak, there has been no release of that allocation. February is coming to an end. It's 5 months now. I expected the contingency fund to have been brought to bear to ameliorate the plight of the people. If as individuals, MP, corporate Ghana, NGOs, foundations, embassies, we've been able to, in our own small way, construct houses that have been able to house 600 people. A whole government, the president, the custodian of our taxes, of our national resources, not a peswa. And then on a major occasion like the message on the state of the nation, in compliance with Article 67 of the Constitution, the president didn't think that such a major disaster, your fellow citizens, thousands across many constituencies, across regions, to just, even a word of empathy. So Richard should not.
But he's been there.
Richard should not aggravate the situation.
He's been there. He's empathized with the people. So life goes on.
Richard should not compel us to even open old wounds. When he came, what did he tell us? That we don't vote for him. If it was about votes, he would not be there. I mean, statements that have been roundly condemned, things he should never have said. He repeated it recently when the chiefs of a Konfi called on him. Look, this president has not treated us fairly. and he continues on this path. And I think that people like Richard, who come from the Volta region in his party, should be honest to look the president in his face and tell him that, look, Mr. President, you are not treating the people of the Volta region, where Richard and all of us come from, with dignity, with respect. We are all taxpayers, and you should not. So what Richard is doing this evening is even more offensive.
Let me take a break on PM Express, and then when I come back, we'll delve into the free SHS conversation. Please stay on with me. I still have Dr. Kwapong, who is also a political scientist and a governance expert. I will be picking your thought after this break. Please stay. Welcome back to PM Express. We're still digesting the State of the Nation address by President Akufo-Addo, which he delivered to Parliament today. Let me quickly bring in Dr. Osai Kwapong before I give the politicians opportunity to delve into the free SHS situation. Your quick impression of the President's speech today.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you very much. For me, the President picked the things that he wanted to highlight. Obviously, there are other key issues that others would have loved, or felt it important enough to make it part of his address. I was particularly struck by the amount of time in the beginning of the speech that was dedicated to the issues of security. I saw that as a reminder to the Ghanaian people that, particularly if you think of the current happenings in the West Africa sub-region, that it was important to give it some thought and some reflection, to realize that given what is surrounding us, that, at least when it comes to the safety and security, of the nation, and the fact that the government is in full control, that we were in a good position from that angle, because that lack of security then could present other challenges, on other matters of governance, the economy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There was also then the tying it into of that with, the challenges that the sub-region is facing, when it comes to democracy, the importance of elections, and the fact that we need to, continue to safeguard, our democracy. It was interesting to hear him mention what the theme of the this year's 6 March celebration is going to be, which is our democracy, our pride. So for me, that is the key thing. Yes, there were other issues that the president mentioned, but the reason why the security, but more importantly, the democracy piece, is what, for me, is going to inform my reflection over the next several days, is because our democracy, and I agree with the president that, yes, he didn't use this expression, but I've regularly said that Ghanaians have made their peace with democracy. If you look at some of the attitudes and sentiments we've expressed about democracy and democratic norms in the Afrobarometer survey. But at the same time, we are also expressing some real angst about how democracy is working. Our democracy is facing some challenges. If you look at the most recent 2023 Democracy Index from the Economic Intelligence Unit, you do see a certain amount of deterioration in the quality of our democracy. And so for me, that is I was glad to hear the president devote some time to talking about that. But I think there's a second phase of that conversation. And hopefully the theme of our democracy, our pride, provides us that opportunity to talk about the things that we are doing well when it comes to Ghana's democracy, but also have a real frank conversation about the quality of our democracy, the challenges it is facing, and how we deal with those challenges over the next several years as we move towards democratic consolidation.
Great. And for me, one interesting thing was the talk about elections. But let me bring in the education bit, the free SHS. And the president says, yes, we've run it very well. It's showing in the performance of WASI, the recent one. But he says we must work towards improving it.
Significantly, this is the first time the president has conceded that the free SHS policy will require an improvement. And I say that, look, it's a major development, and the president is welcome to where all of us have been. If you've listened to our party, if you've listened to civil society, if you've listened to educationists, practitioners, everybody has said that, look, in principle, we are all for free SHS. I mean, who wouldn't want, I mean, free education has been part of our history as a people since, the newly independent Ghana. I mean, Kwame Nkrumah is celebrated for his free education programs, particularly as an affirmative action to bridge the gap between the North and the South. So who would not, support, such a leveler, such an important social intervention which, guarantees the, future of our country. But we have always said that there are challenges with it. Look at the quality of education. Look at the fact that double track is still being implemented. If we had invested in infrastructure, if the e-blocks we started when we're in power had been completed, there would be no need for double track.
He said the quality has not been affected.
When they introduced double track, it was because they had to respond to congestion. It was knee-jerk, it was rushed. So I am glad that the president has now done a 360. He's saying that, quote, the arguments about A should cease and we should simply concentrate on finding ways to improve it, unquote. So when we have always said review, you remember that they twisted review to say that review means cancellation. I am glad that we are all now at the same point where we agree that it is a great policy, but we have to improve it. Look, we can't have a situation where time on task has reduced. You have many students who are spending more time at home than in school because of double track. You have a situation where the quality of food is just terrible. I mean, many parents, you talk to them, and there's a lot of secret payments going on so that you can have your children survive. Some are having to now augment with extra classes and all of that, and they are actually spending more. If you even look at the various prospectus from the schools, how much parents are being called upon to pay, So I'm really excited that the president has joined us where we have always been. That yes, it's a good policy, but it needs improvement, and all of us need to build consensus. That's why our flag bearer, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, has talked about having a national dialogue on free SHS so that everybody's inputs can be brought on board and we can improve the policy. And I'm really glad that the president has finally come to where we have always been standing.
Richard, what's the plan for the improvement as the president is asking everybody to find a way of improving it? What's the plan from your end?
That His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo has treated all of us as citizens fairly. Let that point not be made that he has not treated some people fairly and has treated others fairly. I don't think that is a unifying comment. It's a divisive comment. I think we should encourage it. The point I made was clear that President has made provision to address the issue. If he didn't mention it, it was just because he couldn't have touched on everything. But then it's as important to him as anything else that he didn't mention. I think I want to be on record in making that point. On the free SHS, I think we need to also make the point that the NDC has never in principle been for the free. They have been in principle in support of progressive, which is different from free SHS. So that point must be made. And also the point must be made that there is a difference between the review the NDC promises and the improvement the president is talking about. They are not the same. Their review will aim at canceling free SHS in form we have it. Improvement will not do that. Improvement is to enhance, continue to invest in the free SHS to ensure that it actually addresses the cost barrier, which is its primary objective, to ensure that access is given to people like my salespeople who come from my background to be able to access education. So that is the value of the improvement the president is talking about.
So
and if you follow his statement, the plan fundamentally would be to intensify investment and ensure that the issues is raising about infrastructure. We built a considerable amount of infrastructure, but you continue to invest in that, invest in teacher training, and now you see there's expansion with TVET, which is also been included in the free SHS component to ensure that we are expanding opportunity to our young people to access education. And the president makes the point that perhaps the next generation will be the most blessed generations because all these young people are put in a place that many of previous generation didn't have, that the idea of having occasion to go to school was a luxury for many. And many people like that from my background didn't have that chance, but today they have that to build a better future for themselves and their families. So the big idea is to sustain the free SHS, protect it, make sure nothing comes to review it, nothing comes to destabilize it, but we continue to make progressive changes to ensure that it works. My brother mentioned about food conditions and all that. We know. We hear these things about the abuse of the resources that goes there, that some institutional operators will abuse the facilities that go there. The improvement will focus on how we put in place checks and balances to ensure that allocation that is given to the school goes to address the problems that have been put in place. I've had instances where people have told me small issues, institutional conflict between the headmaster or staff member leads to lack of communication that puts the number of students there at a certain figure, but then it's less than that or it's more than that. So small institutional frictions or misalignment create bigger problems that results in some of these food conditions that my brother is highlighting. We need improvement, administrative improvement, implementation improvement to ensure that we address all these loopholes and ensure that the students are benefiting optimally. That is the improvement the president is talking about. One, increase in investment, ensure that the policy endures, and ensure we build infrastructure, and ensure that we address all the administrative bottlenecks to ensure that the policy runs smoothly.
We're running out of time, but we've been giving just from 2 minutes to wrap. Yes. So just briefly for me.
Okay. Just one small point. So the idea of review, I think that my brother and the NDC must accept. To every policy, you have to evaluate and improve on that policy. So it's never alien to say that we need improvement in the free SHS. That is the language of policy, and the president was right when he called for that. But what he said emphatically that we must take note of is that the debate about its suitability, its relevance and utility must end, because it has come to show that the free SHS going forward has transformed people's life and will transform the prospect of our country.
Right. Let me give you the 1 minute left. And the president rather today tried to reaffirm his constitutional mandate, and he says he takes responsibility for everything that has happened, and people felt that, and then he made the point that it will be only a foolish president who will not listen to advice. People were like, was he trying to respond to the Baumia mates analogy that has been topical over the period since the day he launched his vision? What was going through your mind when the president said that?
Clearly I see a president who is feeling lonely, who is feeling abandoned. Everybody around him has just, deserted him. The vice president says the president is impervious to advice. I'm only a mate. I was only EMT chairman, which is a subcommittee of cabinet. And so please don't blame me. I have my own vision. You've heard the general secretary of the MPP say that they don't like what appointees are doing. A lot of them are lazy and are not helping the party. They should leave. You've heard the national organizer who's gone on record to say that they don't support these taxes. It's making, campaigning for the party so difficult. You've heard Mr. Kwame Pienim. You've heard Kennedy Ejapon and many leading members of the party, Dr. Atta Kennedy, Dr. Mwakuba and others, who are all saying that, look, the president has destroyed their party, he's embarrassed the UP, MPP tradition. So I'm not surprised that the president finds himself in a quandary. In one breath, he wants to take blame, and in another breath, he's saying that, look, it's been teamwork, I have not been impervious to advice. But I'll leave that turmoil for the MPP to deal with. It's just clear to us that, look, this anchor cannot hold. The ship is sinking. You have people who are engaged in the blame game. Nobody wants to take full responsibility. We just have to pack them and bring in a new, fresh, dynamic team that will get us out of the doldrums, which is what President Mahama offers with his 24-hour economy agenda, his constitutional reforms he's talking about, his governance reforms, and how he will do things in an incorruptible way and will bring back the pride of our country. Let me conclude on a very strange development from the president's speech. This vexed issue of tax waivers. So consistently, the president has said that tax waivers are not good for us. If you look at his 2019 message on the State of the Nation, he said, and I quote, "If we continue at this rate, in less than 16 years, half of Ghana's revenue base will be given away as tax exemptions. Mr. Speaker, this is not sustainable. We have to do something about this." Then today, page 25 of his address, the president says, however, from 2021 to date, no exemptions have been granted. Mr. Speaker, I urge the House to consider and approve all the outstanding exemption applications as a matter of urgency. Can you believe that? I mean, president who told us that tax exemptions are not good, they are destroying. And look, the tax exemptions we have refused to approve, there are about 45 of them, amounting to 5.5 billion cedis. Imagine what 5.5 billion cedis, about 450 million US dollars, can do for this economy. So we will not take this advice. This is appeal to us. We are not going to listen. I want to serve notice here that our opposition to these tax waivers is solid, resolute. We are not going to heed to this president's advice. We agree with him, what he said in his 2019 message on the State of the Nation, that these tax waivers have become too many. It's going to destroy our economy. And if you look at even the profile of these companies, crony companies, you see the directors, and it's clear. I mean, these are party hacks, and it's not going to enhance the welfare of this country. It's not going to help our economy in any way. So this is appeal to us to approve these tax waivers, which is contradictory, a major U-turn from what he has told us in previous messages on the State of the Nation. We don't know what is accounting for his sudden betrayal.
So you will not approve?
So we will not approve it. We will not heed his advice.
Richard, let me give you 1 minute. I mean, likely we've been giving some few minutes. In fact, we have just 1 minute to wrap up. Address the tax exemption bit for me. If it wasn't good in 2019, why is it good now?
I think that my brother is being disingenuous. In fact, when the president mentioned that in Parliament, I saw their body language, they were reacting to it negatively. But I'm saying that this is a political party that is promising Ghanaians they're coming to create jobs. The president told us how many jobs have been created under one district, one factory, about 170,000. He's saying that that is not even enough. Now, the companies that they are seizing, whose exemptions they are seizing, are one district, one factory companies that are coming to add on to the job. So now the NDC must tell us if they are interested in creating jobs or they are interested in blocking jobs. Parliament must, as a citizen, as young people in this country, must protest Parliament's insistence on blocking these exemptions. Because why? These companies, once they are set on, it's a policy position. Once they have these exemptions and they are able to install, they are going to employ Ghanaians. So if my brother agrees with Professor Bokpin that people are at the embassies by day and traveling by night, this is the problem. Parliament must do its work. They must ensure that what comes there, they must deliberate it, see the merit in it, and pass it. But they cannot tell us beforehand that they are going to resist and they will not do anything to help the Ghanaians. We want to create jobs here.
I'm grateful for your time. Richard Ahiangba is Communications Director of the NPP. Grateful. Samuel Okujeto Ablakwa, who is MP for North Tong and ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I'm also grateful to you, Dr. Osai Kwapon and Professor Bokping, all of you for joining. Grateful for watching PM Express. Enjoy the rest of our programs.